The morning everything changed, I was wearing my grandmother's pearls and a dark blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Not that anyone in Davidson and Mitchell Law noticed. To them, I was just Sophia Barrett, the efficient but unremarkable executive secretary who'd been managing their office for the past 8 years. If they'd bothered to look closer, they might have wondered why someone with an MBA from Wharton and a real estate empire worth 9 figures was just anything. But people see what they expect to see, and Jeffrey Davidson had always expected to see nothing more than a secretary. I straightened papers on my desk, solid mahogany that had been here longer than most of the junior partners, and reviewed the morning schedule. Board meeting at 9 a.m., where they'd be discussing the firm's expansion plans. Plans I'd helped craft, though my name appeared nowhere on the proposals. "Coffee, Sophia," Jeffrey called as he swept past my desk, our manna suit perfectly pressed, ego perfectly inflated. "The good stuff, not that break room garbage. And make sure the Harrison files are ready for the meeting." I smiled politely. "Of course, Mr. Davidson." I'd already prepared both, along with a detailed analysis of their latest acquisition target. Analysis that would somehow become Jeffrey's brilliant insight by the end of the meeting. What Jeffrey didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly buying up the commercial real estate around their precious law firm. Building by building, through various shell companies and investment trusts, I'd assembled a portfolio that included not just their office tower, but half the prime properties in downtown Seattle. The previous building owner, old Mr. Matthews, had been looking for a quiet sale. Someone who'd maintained the property's integrity rather than flip it for quick profit. We closed the deal over dinner at my penthouse last week, sharing stories about how many people underestimated us both. Ms. Barrett, Andrea, one of the young paralegals, appeared at my desk looking nervous. The promotion committee wanted me to deliver this. She handed me an envelope, her expression sympathetic. I already knew what it contained. I'd seen the committee's notes, heard their dismissive comments. Just a secretary, they'd said. Competent but not partner material. Inside was a form letter, thanking me for my interest in the junior partner position, but regretfully informing me that they'd chosen to go in another direction. That direction, I knew, was Bradley Thompson III, fresh out of law school with mediocre grades but excellent family connections. "Thank you, Andrea," I said, tucking the letter into my desk drawer. She lingered, clearly wanting to say more. "It's not fair," she finally burst out. "You basically run this place. Everyone knows it." I met her eyes, seeing in them the same fire I'd had at her age. "Life rarely is fair, Andrea, but it is interesting." The board meeting started precisely at 9 a.m. I sat in my usual corner, taking notes while the partners discussed their grand plans for expansion. They needed another floor, they decided. The firm was growing, and their current space wouldn't suffice. Jeffrey leaned back in his chair, confident as always. "I'll talk to building management, see if we can negotiate something reasonable." I made a note in my leather-bound notebook, my handwriting precise and unhurried. In 3 days, they'd learned that building management had changed, that their lease, up for renewal next month, was now under new ownership. The meeting continued, partners pontificating about market dominance and growth strategies. I recorded it all, adding my own observations in a simple cipher I developed years ago. Knowledge, after all, was power. And I had 8 years of knowledge about every deal, every client, every secret that passed through these walls. At lunch, Jeffrey called me into his office. The rejection letter sat on his desk. "Sophia," he said, not bothering to look up from his phone. "About your application. I trust you understand our decision." I stood quietly, hands clasped in front of me. "Of course, Mr. Davidson. It's nothing personal. You're excellent at what you do. Invaluable, really. But partner? That's not really your place." I watched him, this man who thought he held all the cards, who believed his position at the top was unassailable. "And what exactly is my place, Mr. Davidson?" He looked up then, irritation flickering across his features. "Don't be difficult, Sophia. You're a secretary, a very good one, but still just a secretary. Know your place and stay in it." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with condescension. I smiled, the same pleasant, professional smile I'd worn for 8 years. "Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Davidson. Will there be anything else?" He waved me away, already forgetting our conversation. I returned to my desk and opened my private email. 3 messages waited, one from my property management company, one from my investment advisor, and one from Mr. Matthews confirming the final transfer of ownership. I responded to each one, my fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they'd learn what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. That evening, as the office emptied, I stayed late as usual. But instead of managing the firm's paperwork, I prepared for my own transformation. I reviewed the new lease terms I had drawn up, significantly higher than the current rate but still just below market value. Just enough to hurt without being legally actionable. I also prepared letters to each of the firm's top clients whose relationships I'd quietly nurtured over the years. Letters explaining my departure and my new venture, a boutique legal consulting firm specializing in the exact type of work Davidson and Mitchell handled. Andrea stopped by my desk on her way out. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly. "You're worth 10 of them." I looked up at her, this bright young woman with dreams bigger than her current position. "Andrea, would you be interested in joining me for coffee tomorrow morning? I have a proposition you might find interesting." She brightened. "Really?" "Yes, absolutely." "Excellent. And Andrea, don't mention this to anyone else." "Not yet." After she left, I walked to the window and looked out over the Seattle skyline. 8 years I'd played this role, building my empire in secret while they dismissed me as just a secretary. Tomorrow, they'd learn that sometimes the real power isn't in a corner office. It's at the desk right outside it. I gathered my things, including the small brass nameplate that had sat on my desk all these years. I wouldn't need it anymore. Tomorrow, I'd have a new nameplate on a new door in my building. As I walked out, Jeffrey was still in his office, probably working on the expansion proposal. He didn't look up as I passed. He never did. "Good night, Mr. Davidson," I called out, my voice perfectly pleasant. "Night, Sophia," he replied absently, not knowing it was the last time he casually dismissed me. Tomorrow would change everything, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized just how badly he'd underestimated his just a secretary. I arrived at La Maison Café at precisely 7:30 am, early enough to secure the corner table with the view of Davidson and Mitchell's building, my building. Andrea was already waiting, nervously stirring her cappuccino. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, setting down my Hermes bag, a quiet indulgence I'd always downplayed at the office. "I trust you haven't mentioned this to anyone?" She shook her head. "No, but something's happening, isn't it? You seem different today." I smiled, pulling out a folder embossed with a new logo. "Barrett Strategic Consulting. How would you like to be my first employee? Starting salary twice what you're making now, plus equity in the company." Her eyes widened as she looked at the contract. "But how? I mean, yesterday you were just a secretary." I finished for her, amused. "Andrea, that's lesson 1. Never be what others expect you to be." While they were busy underestimating me, I built something of my own. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from my property management company, new lease terms delivered to Davidson and Mitchell. Meeting requested immediately. Perfect timing. I looked back at Andrea. "You don't have to decide right now, but I get to the office early today. It's going to be interesting." By 8:45 am, chaos had erupted at Davidson and Mitchell. I walked through the lobby, my lobby, to find Jeffrey Davidson in a heated argument with the building's management representative. "This is impossible," he was saying, waving papers in the air. "The rent can't just double overnight. Who the hell is this new owner?" I passed by silently, taking my usual place at my desk. For now, the morning board meeting had been hastily rescheduled to address the rental crisis. I sat in my corner, notebook ready, watching the partners file in. Their faces were tight with worry, their usual confidence replaced by confusion and fear. "This is outrageous," Jeffrey began, standing at the head of the table. "Some mystery buyer has acquired the building and is trying to force us out with these ridiculous terms. We need options, people. We could look at other properties," Bradley Thompson Ayala suggested, shooting a smug glance my way. He'd been particularly pleased about getting the promotion over me. "In this market," another partner scoffed, "everything comparable is either occupied or even more expensive. Plus, moving would cost a fortune." "What about legal action?" Jeffrey demanded. "There must be something." Actually, I said quietly, speaking up for the first time in 8 years of board meetings. The new terms are completely legal. I made sure of that. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. You? What? Jeffrey asked, his face reddening. I stood smoothing my designer dress. No more hiding my success in modest outfits. The new owner reviewed all auctions carefully before setting the new terms. Everything is well within market rates and legal parameters. How would you know that? Bradley sneered. I smiled, reaching into my bag for a stack of documents. Because, Mr. Thompson, I am the new owner, not just of this building, but of the entire block, and several others downtown. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear their minds racing, re-evaluating every interaction, every dismissive comment, every time they called me just a secretary. That's impossible, Jeffrey sputtered. You're a secretary? No, Mr. Davidson. I was pretending to be a secretary while building my real estate empire. There's a difference. I began distributing the documents. These are your options. Option 1. Accept the new lease terms, effective immediately. Option 2. Vacate the premises within 60 days as per the original lease agreement. Bradley jumped up. This is blackmail. This is business. I corrected him. The same business you claimed I wasn't qualified to participate in when you denied my partnership application. One of the senior partners, Elizabeth Chen, had been studying me with newfound respect. How long? She asked quietly. How long have you owned? 3 years for my first building, I replied. This one officially became mine last week. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? Jeffrey had collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. Why? He managed. Why work as a secretary if you owned? Knowledge is power, Mr. Davidson. You taught me that, though not in the way you intended. Every client meeting, every deal, every secret that passed through this office, I learned from all of it, built on it. While you were busy looking down on me, I was looking at the bigger picture. I walked to the window, my window now, and gazed out at the city skyline. By the way, I'm resigning, effective immediately, though I suspect you figured that out. You can't do this, Jeffrey said, but his voice had lost its usual authority. We'll fight it. I turned back to face them. You can try, but consider this. I know every weakness in this firm, every ethical gray area, every questionable decision, every client you've overcharged or underserved. I've documented it all. I padded my notebook. 8 years of notes, gentlemen. Care to test how detailed they are? The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. They could fight me, but they wouldn't win. Elizabeth Chen stood up. I'd like to speak with Ms. Barrett privately, she announced, and I suggest the rest of you start seriously considering those options she presented. As the others filed out, looking shell-shocked, Andrea appeared at the door. She was carrying a box of her belongings. I quit, she announced, grinning. I'm accepting that job offer, Ms. Barrett, if it's still open. It absolutely is, I replied. And please call me Sophia. The rest of that morning passed in a blur of activity. Word spread quickly through the office. The quiet secretary, who'd been invisible for so long, was suddenly the most powerful person in the building, literally. By lunch, 3 more employees had resigned to join my new venture. By afternoon, 2 of Davidson and Mitchell's biggest clients had requested meetings with me. I sat in my old desk one last time, watching Jeffrey pace in his office, making frantic phone calls. He tried calling his own real estate contacts, only to discover I owned most of the suitable properties in the area. He tried threatening legal action, only to have his own attorneys remind him of how much I knew about the firm's operations. He even tried appealing to my sympathy, sending Elizabeth to negotiate. But I'd spent 8 years being sympathetic. Now it was time for something else. As the day drew to a close, I stood to leave. Jeffrey stepped out of his office, looking somehow older than he had that morning. Sophia, he called out, his voice strained. Please, let's discuss this reasonably. I paused, turning to face him. Reasonable? Like how you reasonably explained that I should know my place. He flinched. I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong about you. We can fix this, make you a partner, give you whatever position you want. Oh, Mr. Davidson, I said softly, you still don't understand. I don't want a position in your firm. I want your firm to be a tenant in my building, and now it is. I picked up my bag and headed for the elevator. Behind me, I heard him call out one last time. What happens now? I stepped into the elevator, turning to face him. Now? Now you learn what it feels like to not be in control. The new lease terms are due signed by tomorrow at noon. Don't be late. I hear the new owner is quite strict about deadlines. The doors closed on his stunned face, and I smiled. The day wasn't over yet. I had a dinner meeting with Elizabeth Chen, who had expressed interest in joining my new venture, and tomorrow, the real changes would begin. 1 month after my resignation from Davidson and Mitchell, I sat in my new office on the top floor of the Barrett Tower, formerly known as the Matthews Building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline, including the 6 other properties I owned in the downtown core. Andrea knocked and entered, tablet in hand. The Davidson and Mitchell partners are here for the lease negotiation. Should I make them wait? I glanced at the antique clock on my wall. A piece I bought at auction years ago, but kept in storage until now. They were 7 minutes early, desperately trying to show good faith. Give them 5 minutes, I replied, adjusting my channel jacket. Let them remember how it feels to wait outside someone else's office. My new headquarters occupied the entire top floor, designed with the quiet elegance I'd always appreciated but never flaunted. The reception area featured original artwork from local artists I'd been supporting anonymously for years. The conference room showcased views of Elliott Bay. Everything spoke of old money and established power, the kind of power that didn't need to shout to be heard. When I finally allowed them in, Jeffrey Davidson looked like he aged years and weeks. Bradley Thompson II had lost his smug smile, and the other partners filed in with the wary respect of people who'd learned a harsh lesson about underestimating others. Thank you for coming, I said, not rising from my desk. Please take a seat. They arranged themselves around the conference table, the same one I'd sat beside for 8 years, taking notes while they ignored my presence. I bought it in a liquidation sale when Davidson and Mitchell downsized to half their former space, unable to afford the new rent. Ms. Barrett, Jeffrey began, his voice carefully neutral. We've reviewed your latest proposal. And? It's aggressive. But we're prepared to accept the terms with some modifications. I opened the leather portfolio in front of me, my grandmother's, the same one I used as their secretary. Modifications? Like the ones you suggested to the Harrison contract last year, the ones that walked the line of legal malpractice? They shifted uncomfortably. Elizabeth Chen, who had indeed joined my new venture as lead counsel, smiled slightly from her seat beside me. That's not relevant to these negotiations, Bradley interjected, trying to sound authoritative. Everything is relevant, Mr. Thompson. That's something you learn when you pay attention instead of relying on family connections. I let that sink in before continuing. But you're right, let's focus on the present. I pressed a button on my desk, and a screen descended from the ceiling. These are your current financials. Notice the pattern. Client retention down 40%, revenue dropped 35% last quarter, and 3 more partners are considering departure. How did you get this information? Jeffrey demanded. I smiled. The same way I got everything else, by being invisible while you were being careless. But that's not important right now. What's important is your future, or rather, if you'll have one. Elizabeth handed each of them a new document. This is our final offer. The rent stays as is, but we're willing to offer a longer-term lease, with conditions. They read in silence, faces growing paler with each page. This is impossible, Jeffrey finally said. You want a controlling interest in Davidson and Mitchell? Not want, Mr. Davidson. Have. Check the fine print of your partnership agreement, the one I helped draft 8 years ago. Your firm's debt ratio now exceeds the stability threshold. As your primary creditor, through various holdings, I can exercise the conversion option. The room erupted in chaos. Partners talking over each other, papers being shuffled, faces reddening with anger and fear. I let them vent for exactly 1 minute before raising my hand. The silence that followed was immediate. They'd learned at least that much. Gentlemen, let me be clear. Your firm is failing. Not because I raised the rent, but because you never understood what made you successful in the first place. It wasn't your name on the door or your expensive suits. It was the people you overlooked, the ones who actually did the work while you took the credit. I stood walking to the window. I'm offering you a chance to survive, to become part of something bigger. Barrett Strategic Holdings isn't just a real estate company. We're redefining how business is done in this city. By taking over your former employers? Bradley asked bitterly. No, Mr. Thompson. By recognizing talent wherever it exists. By building something that values substance over status. I turned back to face them. Elizabeth left your firm to join me. So did Andrea, and 17 other employees. Want to know why? None of them spoke. Because I saw them. All those years while you were ignoring us, we were building relationships, supporting each other, creating a network that now spans every major company in Seattle. My phone buzzed. A message from my property management team. 3 more tenants had signed with us, fleeing Davidson and Mitchell's sinking ship. You have 24 hours to decide, I continued. Join us, under new leadership and new principles, or find new offices outside the city center. I hear there's space available in Tacoma. Jeffrey stood slowly, his shoulders slumped. You planned this all along, didn't you? Every detail. No, Mr. Davidson, you planned it. Every time you called me just a secretary. Every time you took credit for my work. Every time you reminded me to know my place. You taught me exactly what kind of leader not to be. After they left, Elizabeth stayed behind. That was impressive, she said. But why give them any chance at all? Why not just let them fail? I sat back down, touching my grandmother's pearls. Because success isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. They'll either learn to adapt or they'll disappear. Either way, the landscape of power in this city has already changed. The next day, news broke of the acquisition. Barrett Strategic Holdings acquires Davidson and Mitchell in historic deal, read the headlines. The business world buzzed with speculation about the mysterious woman who'd built an empire right under everyone's noses. Reporters called, wanting to know how a simple secretary had orchestrated such a takeover. I declined all interviews, letting the results speak for themselves. 1 week later, I called a company-wide meeting. The old Davidson and Mitchell staff, now Barrett Strategic employees, filled the auditorium. Jeffrey and the former partners sat in the back row, their new positions still uncertain. Some of you knew me as a secretary, I began. Others as your landlord. Now you know me as your CEO. But titles aren't what matter here. What matters is vision, dedication, and the courage to be more than what others expect of you. I gestured to Andrea, now my chief of operations, and Elizabeth, my general counsel. Look around. The people you once overlooked are now your leaders, not because of their names or their connections, but because of their talent and their integrity. In the following months, Barrett Strategic Holdings transformed Seattle's business landscape. We acquired 3 more firms, renovated 5 buildings, and launched a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs. Jeffrey Davidson eventually retired, unable to adapt to his new role. Bradley Thompson II left for a smaller firm in Tacoma. But others, those who learned to see beyond their prejudices, found new success under our leadership. 1 year after my resignation, I sat in my office reviewing applications for our new mentorship program. A knock at the door revealed Paul, my old security guard from Davidson and Mitchell, now head of building security for all Barrett properties. Ms. Barrett, he said with a smile, your next appointment is here. Another former secretary looking to invest in real estate. I smiled back, remembering my own journey. Send her in, Paul, and remember what I always say. He finished the sentence with me. There's no such thing as just a secretary. The woman who entered looked nervous but determined, clutching a folder of property analysis. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, once upon a time. Welcome, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Tell me, what's your vision? Because that's what Barrett Strategic had become, not just a company, but a movement. A reminder that power doesn't always look like you expect it to, and that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else ignores. As I listened to her pitch, I touched my grandmother's pearls and smiled. The view from the top was spectacular, but the real satisfaction wasn't in the height of my success. It was in changing the way people reached for it. The morning everything changed, I was wearing my grandmother's pearls and a dark blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Not that anyone in Davidson and Mitchell Law noticed. To them, I was just Sophia Barrett, the efficient but unremarkable executive secretary who'd been managing their office for the past 8 years. If they'd bothered to look closer, they might have wondered why someone with an MBA from Wharton and a real estate empire worth 9 figures was just anything. but people see what they expect to see, and Jeffrey Davidson had always expected to see nothing more than a secretary. I should have known something was wrong when Amanda Thompson, our newly appointed 31-year-old VP of Operations, started scheduling innovation workshops that mysteriously excluded anyone over 40. But after 23 years at Meridian Technologies, I'd grown comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. The morning everything changed, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office, the same office where I developed the security protocol that had saved the company millions in potential breaches. The same office where I'd mentored dozens of young developers who now held senior positions across Silicon Valley. The same office that, though few knew it, I technically owned. Elizabeth? Amanda's voice cut through my concentration. She stood in my doorway, tablet in hand, HR director hovering behind her like a well-dressed shadow. Do you have a moment? I nodded, already knowing what was coming. I'd seen that particular HR expression too many times over the years, the carefully practiced blend of corporate sympathy and professional distance. Of course, I said, closing my laptop. Please sit. Amanda perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, her expensive blazer still carrying the stiff lines of recent purchase. She'd been with the company 3 months, brought in by our new CEO to modernize our approach. Apparently, modernization started with clearing out the old guard. Elizabeth, she began, her voice carrying that particular tone of rehearsed regret. We need to discuss your role at Meridian. I kept my face neutral, though I couldn't help noting how she gripped her tablet like a shield. I'm listening. The industry is evolving rapidly, she continued. We need to ensure our leadership team can adapt quickly to emerging technologies and changing market dynamics. She paused, probably expecting me to defend myself. When I didn't, she pressed on. While your contributions have been valuable, we feel the department needs fresh perspectives, more innovative approaches. I almost smiled at the irony. Just last week, I'd filed another patent for a blockchain security implementation that would revolutionize our client data protection. But Amanda wouldn't know that. She'd canceled our last 3 project review meetings. You're firing me, I said simply, saving her from more corporate euphemisms. She flinched slightly at the directness. We prefer to call it a strategic restructuring. Because I'm too old, I added, watching her squirm. That's not. This isn't about age. It's about cultural fit and innovative thinking. She slid a folder across my desk. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 6 months' salary, plus benefits continuation. I opened the folder, scanning the terms while doing quick mental calculations. The building's current lease with Meridian Technologies would expire in exactly 47 days. How interesting. When? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Effective immediately, the HR director spoke for the first time. We'll need you to clear out your personal belongings today. Jerry from it will help you transfer any necessary files. I nodded slowly, then reached into my desk drawer and pulled out my own folder. I'll need you both to sign this first. Amanda frowned. What is it? Just a personal property receipt, confirming I've removed all my belongings from the premises. They signed without reading it carefully, another example of the corner cutting I'd watched creep in over the past few months. I tucked the paper away carefully. It might prove useful later. Well then, I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. I appreciate your directness. Amanda looked relieved that I wasn't making a scene. You're taking this very professionally, Elizabeth. I admire that. I smiled, thinking about the letter sitting in my personal safe at home. The one from my property management company ready to be sent to Meridian's board. I believe in handling things professionally, always. As I packed up my office, younger employees darted glances my way, their whispered conversations carrying that mixture of pity and relief that comes from watching someone else's execution. They'd learned soon enough. Jerry from it supervised my digital exit with obvious discomfort. He'd started as an intern under my guidance 10 years ago. This isn't right, he muttered as he watched me delete files. You built half these systems. Things change, I said calmly. But remember what I taught you about backup servers and redundancy. He nodded, confused by the non sequitur. Good. That might be important soon. I carried my box of belongings through the lobby of the gleaming building that had been my professional home for over 2 decades. The security guard, Miguel, rushed to open the door for me. Ms. Walker, is everything okay? I paused, looking up at the soaring glass atrium I'd helped design during the building's renovation 5 years ago. It will be, Miguel. Take care of yourself. At home that evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my personal safe. Inside lay the fruits of 20 years of careful planning, property deeds, shell company documentation, and most importantly, the real ownership papers for 1120 Technology Drive, current home of Meridian Technologies headquarters. Years ago, when the company was still young and struggling, they needed capital for expansion. I provided it through a carefully constructed holding company, becoming their landlord without anyone in senior management realizing it. They'd been too busy counting stock options to read the fine print about who actually owned the building they worked in. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Stephen? It's Elizabeth Walker. Remember that contingency plan we discussed? Yes, it's time. Send the letters tomorrow morning. And Stephen? Make sure they understand exactly who they're dealing with now. I hung up and walked to my home office window, looking out over the city lights. Amanda and her executive team would be working late, probably celebrating their successful restructuring. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow, they'd learn what real strategic thinking looked like. I picked up the property receipt they'd signed earlier, the one with microscopic text at the bottom acknowledging the building's true ownership structure. Insurance in case they tried to claim ignorance later. Too old for innovation, I murmured, sipping my wine. We'll see about that. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone buzzed with texts from other employees, expressing shock at my departure. I responded graciously to each one, saying nothing about what was coming. The best moves, as I'd learned over decades in tech, were the ones your opponents never saw coming until it was too late. I slept surprisingly well, knowing that in less than 8 hours, Amanda Thompson and the entire executive team would discover exactly what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. Sometimes the most powerful position isn't the most visible one. Sometimes real power lies in knowing exactly when to play the cards you've been holding all along. And tomorrow would be a masterclass in timing. The next morning, I took my time getting ready. Selected a crisp charcoal suit, my mother's pearl earrings, and the Cartier watch I'd bought after my first patent sale. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about power, and power dresses for the occasion. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Jerry Innate. OMG, all hell just broke loose. Board members arriving for emergency meeting. Amanda looks like she's about to faint. I smiled, picturing the scene. Stephen, my property manager, would have delivered the letters exactly at 9:00 a.m. One to every board member, the CEO, and the legal department. Each letter clearly outlining the building's true ownership, the approaching lease expiration, and the new terms. Terms that would triple their rent and require a complete renegotiation of their occupancy agreement. At 9:27 a.m., another text, this time from my old assistant, Marie. Security just had to bring Amanda water and a chair. She's hyperventilating in the conference room. What did you do? I didn't respond. Instead, I watched my email as the desperate messages started rolling in. First from legal. Urgent matter requiring immediate discussion regarding property ownership and lease terms. Then from HR. Critical oversight in recent personnel decisions. Please contact urgently. Finally, from CEO Daniel Morrison himself. Elizabeth, we need to talk. Name your time and place. I let them sweat for exactly 1 hour before responding to Daniel's email. Sterling Hotel. Noon. Private dining room. His reply came seconds later. We'll be there. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents with my lawyer, making sure every detail was perfect. The ownership structure of 1120 Technology Drive was intricate but ironclad. I'd spent years constructing it, using the same meticulous attention to detail that had supposedly made me too old for modern business. At 11:57 a.m., I walked into the Sterling's private dining room. Daniel was already there, along with Amanda, our CFO James Wilson, and 2 board members. They all stood when I entered. Funny how perspective changes so quickly. Elizabeth, Daniel started, his usual smooth confidence notably absent. There seems to be some confusion. No confusion, I interrupted calmly, taking my seat. The situation is quite clear. Walker Holdings owns this building, has owned it for 20 years, in fact, and your lease expires in 46 days. Amanda's face had taken on a greenish tinge. But But the holding company, the ownership documents, were all properly filed and publicly available. I finished for her. Though I understand why you might have missed them. You've been so busy organizing innovation workshops. James Wilson, who'd always prided himself on knowing every detail of company finances, looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. When you were also convinced that age automatically equals obsolescence. Daniel leaned forward, switching to his negotiation voice. Elizabeth, surely we can work something out. Your experience is valuable to us. Was valuable? I corrected. Yesterday, according to your team, I was too old to understand modern business. Today, suddenly, I'm experienced. Amanda started to speak, but I held up a hand. Don't. There's nothing to discuss about my employment. That bridge is burned. We're here to talk about your occupancy of my building. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Amazing how many life-changing moments involve folders, and slid it across the table. These are the new lease terms. Triple the current rate, bringing it in line with market value. Non-negotiable. Daniel didn't even open it. That would devastate our operating budget. Yes, I agreed. It would. Alternatively, they all leaned forward. Alternatively, I continued, you could relocate. I'm sure your shareholders would love to hear how you need to spend $30 million on a new headquarters because you fired the woman who owned your building. The press would have a field day with that story. Tech company faces crisis after age discrimination backfires. Imagine those headlines. The room fell silent. I could practically hear their careers crumbling. You planned this, Amanda whispered. All along you knew. No, I said sharply. You created this situation. I just chose not to warn you about the consequences. One of the board members, Patricia Chen, spoke for the first time. What do you really want, Elizabeth? I smiled. Finally, an intelligent question. I want you to understand exactly what you threw away. Not just my experience or my contributions, but my strategic thinking. My ability to play the long game. All the things you dismissed because you couldn't see past my age. I stood smoothing my jacket. You have 24 hours to accept the new lease terms. After that, I'll start entertaining offers from other tenants. I understand several of our competitors are looking for premium office space. Wait, Daniel called as I turned to leave. What about a counter offer? Surely there's room for negotiation. I paused at the door. Interesting. Yesterday, there was no room for negotiation about my career. Why should there be room for negotiation about your future today? As I walked out, I heard Amanda burst into tears. Unprofessional, perhaps, but understandable. She just learned a very expensive lesson about judging people by their age. Back in my car, I found 17 missed calls and over 30 messages. Word was spreading fast. I started the engine just as my phone buzzed with a new text from Jerry. Board called all hands meeting for 3 p.m. Everyone's freaking out. Amanda's cleaning out her office. Holy shit, Elizabeth. You're my hero. I drove home, feeling strangely peaceful. There would be more drama to come, more attempts at negotiation, more desperate place to save face. But for now, I had made my point. At 2:45 p.m., my lawyer called. They're preparing a response, he said. Want me to give you the highlights? No need, I replied. Just make sure they understand one thing. This isn't about money. This is about respect. He chuckled. Trust me, they're learning about respect very quickly. By evening, the story had started leaking to industry blogs. No names yet, but plenty of speculation about a major tech company facing eviction because they fired the wrong person. My phone kept buzzing with messages from former colleagues, each one more astonished than the last. I ignored them all, sitting instead in my home office, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The same skyline I could see from my old office. The office Amanda would be vacating very soon. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more negotiations, more attempts to resolve the crisis they created. But tonight, I savored the quiet satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in Meridian's headquarters, a group of executives was learning that innovation isn't about age. It's about wisdom, and wisdom, as they were discovering, sometimes comes with very expensive lessons. The media storm hit faster than anyone expected. By sunrise the next day, the story had exploded across tech news sites. Silicon Valley ageism backfires. Company faces eviction after firing building owner. I sipped my morning coffee, scanning the headlines on my tablet. TechCrunch, Business Insider, Forbes, they all carried variations of the story. Most focus on the delicious irony. A tech company's attempt to modernize by pushing out experienced workers had backfired spectacularly. My phone buzzed. A message from Patricia Chin, the board member who'd asked the intelligent question yesterday. Elizabeth, the board is meeting right now. We need you here. Not as a supplicant, as a consultant. You've made your point. Now help us fix this mess. I considered ignoring it, but Patricia had always been different from the others. More thoughtful, less caught up in the youth worship culture that had infected the industry. 1 hour, I texted back, and I choose who attends. Her response was immediate. Agreed. I dressed carefully again, this time in deep navy, the color of authority, not aggression. As I drove to the building, I reflected on how quickly power dynamics can shift when people finally see what was there all along. The lobby fell silent as I walked in. Miguel, the security guard, gave me a knowing smile and a slight bow as he swiped me through. Employees stopped their conversations to stare as I passed, their expressions a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Many had watched my departure in silence just 2 days ago. Patricia met me at the elevator. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "The board has been in emergency session since 5 a.m. Amanda resigned this morning. Daniel offered to do the same." I raised an eyebrow. "And? We haven't accepted his resignation yet. We wanted to hear your thoughts first." The boardroom looked like a war room. Coffee cups everywhere, papers scattered across the massive table, tired executives slumped in leather chairs. Daniel sat at the far end, his usual immaculate appearance notably disheveled. I took my seat at the head of the table, the position I'd earned but never been offered before. "Let's be clear," I began, my voice carrying in the tense silence. "This isn't just about a building or a lease. This is about a systemic problem in tech, one that you've now become the poster child for." James Wilson, the CFO, winced. "The press is brutal. Our stock dropped 12% at opening. Because investors realize you're being run by people who make monumentally bad decisions," I said calmly, firing someone without even checking if they might be your landlord. That's just the visible symptom of a deeper disease. "How do we fix it?" Patricia asked. I pulled out my own folder. I'd come prepared, of course. First, Amanda's entire modernization program needs to be scrapped. Age discrimination dressed up as innovation isn't just illegal, it's stupid. You've been pushing out decades of experience because you're obsessed with youth. Heads nodded around the table. Amazing how quickly people could see reason when their jobs were on the line. Second, you need a complete overhaul of your hiring and retention policies. I want to see explicit protections against age discrimination, mandatory diverse interview panels, and mentorship programs that value experience. "Done," Patricia said immediately. Third, I continued, you need new leadership. Not just a CEO change, but a fundamental shift in how you view leadership itself. Daniel spoke for the first time. "I assume you have suggestions." "I do." I opened my folder. I identified 3 potential CEO candidates, all over 50, all with proven track records of actual innovation, not just buzzwords and flashy presentations. Their resumes are in here. I slid the folder to Patricia. "The board can review them at their leisure, but understand this, my new lease terms will depend entirely on seeing real change, not just cosmetic fixes." "And what are your terms?" James asked nervously. I smiled. "That depends on what you do next. Right now, you have 2 options. Option 1, accept my original triple-rate lease, keep your current leadership structure, and watch your stock price continue to plummet as this story plays out in the press." They waited tensely for option 2. Option 2, implement every change I've outlined, bring in new leadership that understands the value of experience, and I'll offer you a fair market rate lease with very favorable terms. Plus, I'll help you repair your public image by sharing how you're leading the charge against ageism in tech. The relief in the room was palpable. "But," I added, "I want one more thing." "Name it," Patricia said. "I want a seat on the board. Not as a favor, but as a recognition that the experience you tried to discard is exactly what you need to survive." The vote was unanimous and immediate. Over the next few weeks, Meridian Technologies transformed. Daniel resigned, replaced by Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant 58-year-old former CTO with multiple successful exits under her belt. The innovation workshops were replaced with mixed-age project teams that actually produced results instead of just talking about them. The press noticed. Tech companies' response to ageism scandal sets new industry standard, read one headline. Experience matters. How one company's crisis led to revolutionary change, read another. 3 months after my dramatic exit and even more dramatic return, I sat in my new board member office, coincidentally, my old office, reviewing resumes for our expanded engineering department. The youngest candidate was 22. The oldest was 67. Every one of them would be evaluated solely on their merit. Jerry from it stuck his head in. Elizabeth, you're going to love this. Remember that blockchain security patent you filed right before? Everything. I nodded. Google just offered to license it. 8 figures. I smiled. Tell them to add another figure if they want priority access to the neural network authentication system I developed last month. He grinned and left. Through my window, I could see new signs being installed in the lobby. Meridian Technologies, where innovation meets experience. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Board meeting in 10. Bringing Amanda's replacement for approval. She's 61 and has 3 decades of operations experience. I typed back, perfect. Standing at my window, looking out at the city I'd helped build, I thought about power, real power. Not the kind that comes from titles or corner offices, but the kind that comes from patience, wisdom, and the willingness to play the long game. A game that, as it turns out, only gets better with age. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Miguel called up to my office. Ms. Walker, there's someone here to see you. Says she's from Fortune magazine. I smiled. Send her up. The reporter was young, probably fresh out of journalism school. She clutched her notebook nervously as she sat down. Ms. Walker, thank you for agreeing to this interview. We're doing a feature on transformative leadership in tech, and your story, well, it's become something of a legend. A legend? I raised an eyebrow. Or a warning? She laughed. Maybe both. We're calling the piece The Silver Revolution. How one woman's stand against ageism changed Silicon Valley. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where Amanda had sat to fire me just months ago. Well then, I said, let me tell you about the real revolution. It's not about age or buildings or even power. It's about wisdom, and wisdom? That's something you can only earn with time. She started writing frantically as I began to tell the story, not just my story, but the story of every person who'd ever been dismissed, overlooked, or pushed aside because of their age. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's changing the whole game. I should have known something was wrong when Amanda Thompson, our newly appointed 31-year-old VP of Operations, started scheduling innovation workshops that mysteriously excluded anyone over 40. But after 23 years at Meridian Technologies, I'd grown comfortable, maybe too comfortable. The morning everything changed, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office, the same office where I'd developed the security protocol that had saved the company millions in potential breaches. The same office where I'd mentored dozens of young developers who now held senior positions across Silicon Valley. The same office that, though few knew it, I technically owned. Elizabeth? Amanda's voice cut through my concentration. She stood in my doorway, tablet in hand, HR director hovering behind her like a well-dressed shadow. Do you have a moment? I nodded, already knowing what was coming. I'd seen that particular HR expression too many times over the years, the carefully practiced blend of corporate sympathy and professional distance. Of course, I said, closing my laptop. Please sit. Amanda perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, her expensive blazer still carrying the stiff lines of recent purchase. She'd been with the company 3 months, brought in by our new CEO to modernize our approach. Apparently, modernization started with clearing out the old guard. Elizabeth, she began, her voice carrying that particular tone of rehearsed regret. We need to discuss your role at Meridian. I kept my face neutral, though I couldn't help noting how she gripped her tablet like a shield. I'm listening. The industry is evolving rapidly, she continued. We need to ensure our leadership team can adapt quickly to emerging technologies and changing market dynamics. She paused, probably expecting me to defend myself. When I didn't, she pressed on. While your contributions have been valuable, we feel the department needs fresh perspectives, more innovative approaches. I almost smiled at the irony. Just last week, I'd filed another patent for a blockchain security implement. The leather chair across from my desk had never looked more threatening. Marcus Walsh, my business partner of 7 years, lounged in it like a cat about to pounce. Document folder balanced on his knee, expensive watch catching the late afternoon sun. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Catherine," he said, voice dripping with false sympathy, "we need to talk about the future of Walsh and Porter Solutions." I kept my face neutral, though my stomach tightened. Something in his tone, in the way he'd walked in unannounced at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, set off every alarm bell I developed in 15 years of corporate survival. "Of course," I replied, closing my laptop. "What's on your mind?" He leaned forward, placing the folder on my desk with theatrical precision. "The board has concerns. Significant ones. About your direction for the company." The board. As if we had some vast corporate structure instead of a 4-person advisory panel that Marcus had handpicked last year. I'd objected then, seeing it for what it was, the first move in a longer game. I should have fought harder. "Interesting," I said, not touching the folder. "Considering our revenue is up 40% since I implemented the new client acquisition strategy." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Numbers can be misleading. We're talking about vision, Catherine. The bigger picture." He paused, studying me like a specimen under glass. "The board feels, and I agree, that your approach is too cautious, too traditional." I almost laughed. Cautious. That's what they called building sustainable client relationships and maintaining quality control. Unlike Marcus's approach of chasing quick wins and cutting corners, which had nearly bankrupted us twice before my cautious strategies saved us. "The market's changing," he continued. "We need to be aggressive, take bigger risks. The board has approved a new direction." He tapped the folder. "One that, unfortunately, doesn't include you in a leadership position." There it was, the knife, finally showing itself after months of shadow play. "You want to buy me out," I said flatly. His smile widened. "Smart as always, Kate. Though want isn't quite accurate. This isn't a negotiation." I opened the folder. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. They were offering 15% of my shares' actual value, wrapped in legal language about performance concerns and breach of fiduciary duty. Complete fabrication, but expensive lawyers can make fiction sound remarkably legitimate. "This is absurd," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I built half this company. Our biggest clients are my relationships." "Were your relationships," he corrected smoothly. "Check page 3. The board has already voted to remove you from all client accounts. As of Monday, they'll be working directly with me." I flipped to the page. The signatures were already there, including Thomas Reed's, my mentor from business school, the man who'd helped us secure our first round of funding. The betrayal stung more than I wanted to admit. "And if I refuse?" Marcus's smile turned predatory. "Then on Monday, the board files a formal complaint alleging mismanagement and breach of contract. The evidence is quite compelling. You'd be amazed what a good forensic accountant can construct with access to company records." He leaned back, adjusting his cuffs. "Your reputation would never recover. No one wants to hire an executive with fraud allegations, even unfounded ones." I stared at him, this man I trusted. We'd started the company in my garage, living on coffee and determination, sharing dreams of building something meaningful. Now he sat there, ready to destroy everything we built, everything I'd sacrificed for, and he was enjoying it. "You have 24 hours, he said, standing. "Sign the papers, take the money, walk away quietly, or don't, and watch everything you've built burn down around you. Your choice." He strode out, leaving the folder open on my desk like a whelmed. I sat there as the sun set, casting long shadows across the office. Our office. Pictures on the wall tracked our company's growth. The first client celebration, the office opening, team photos from each year. My life's work, being stripped away in a single afternoon. But as the initial shock faded, something else took its place. Not despair, not defeat. Something colder, clearer. Because Marcus, for all his plotting, had made one critical mistake. He thought he knew all my cards. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. James, it's Catherine Porter. Remember that conversation we had about Marcus's loans? I think it's time we discussed terms. The line crackled with static, then James Sullivan's smooth voice came through. I was wondering when you'd call. Shall we meet? Tonight, I said. And James, bring everything you have. I hung up and looked around my office one last time. Tomorrow, I would sign those papers. I would smile, shake Marcus's hand, and walk away quietly. And then I would show him exactly what cautious really meant. Later that night, in a private room at the Sterling Hotel's restaurant, James Sullivan laid out the full picture of Marcus's secret empire of debt. Credit cards, personal loans, high-interest private lending, all hidden from the company books, all teetering on the edge of default. He's leveraged to the hilt, James explained, sliding documents across the table, using company assets as unofficial collateral. One mispayment and the whole house of cards comes down. I studied the numbers, each page revealing more of Marcus's desperate financial gymnastics. How has he kept this hidden? James shrugged. Creative accounting and a lot of different lenders. But they're getting nervous. Word is he's been missing payments. How much to buy all of it? He named a figure that made my throat tighten. Nearly everything I had, including my emergency fund and the money from my mother's estate. But it would be enough. You sure about this? James asked, watching me carefully. Once you start down this road. I thought about Marcus's smirk, about the years of subtle undermining, about how he convinced the board to turn on me. Yes, I said. I'm sure. We spent the next 3 hours working out the details. By the time I left, everything was in motion. In less than 12 hours, I would sign away my visible power in the company. But by Monday morning, I would control something far more valuable, every cent Marcus owed. As I drove home in the quiet hours before dawn, I felt strangely peaceful. Marcus thought he was forcing me into a corner, but he'd actually given me exactly what I needed. A way to prove that sometimes the most dangerous moves are the ones that look like surrender. I parked in my driveway, watching the first hints of sunrise paint the sky. In a few hours, I would walk into that office and play my part. I would be the defeated partner, the cautious one who didn't have the stomach for real business. But as I sat there, watching the world wake up, I allowed myself a small smile. Because by this time tomorrow, Marcus would learn what I'd known all along, that true power isn't in what you can take. It's in what you make others give up willingly. The sun rose fully, marking the start of a day that would change everything. I was ready. The fountain pen felt heavy in my hand as I signed away 7 years of my life. Marcus stood over my shoulder, practically vibrating with poorly concealed triumph. Each scratch of the nib against paper was another victory for him, another step toward what he thought was his ultimate win. Initial here, and here, he said, pointing to marked lines with manicured precision, and the final signature on the last page. I signed everything without hesitation, my handwriting steady and clear. No point in betraying the anticipation building in my chest. The real show wouldn't start for another 18 hours. Well, Marcus said, gathering the papers with exaggerated care. I appreciate your professionalism about this, Catherine. The severance payment will be processed Monday morning. I stood smoothing my blazer. Of course. Though I do have one question. He paused, already halfway to the door. Oh? Did you ever actually read the terms of your business loans? The fine print, I mean. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, then the first hint of unease. What are you talking about? I smiled, gentle and calm. Nothing important. Just curious. Have a good weekend, Marcus. He left without another word, but the spring in his step was gone. I planted the first seed of doubt, and now all I had to do was wait. I spent that Saturday methodically removing personal items from my office, carefully packing away the visible signs of my time at Walsh & Porter Solutions. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with updates from James's team as they executed our plan with surgical precision. First set of loan transfers complete. One message read. Second batch processing now. All credit lines secured. Documentation updated. Final transfers confirmed. Everything's ready for Monday. By sunset, my office was empty except for company property. I stood in the doorway one last time, remembering the day Marcus and I had first walked into this space. We'd been so full of dreams then, of plans to build something that mattered. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of that. Or maybe he'd never really shared those dreams at all. My phone buzzed one final time. James himself. It's done. All debts acquired. Legal team standing by for Monday morning. I texted back a simple thank you and drove home, feeling the weight of tomorrow pressing against my chest. Not anxiety, anticipation. Sunday crawled by with excruciating slowness. I knew Marcus would be in his office, preparing for what he thought would be his grand ascension on Monday morning. He probably spent hours rehearsing speeches, planning changes, imagining his moment of complete control. Let him plan. Let him dream. The best lessons are the ones we never see coming. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that promises change. I dressed carefully, charcoal gray suit, cream silk blouse. The pearl necklace my mother left me. Power written in fabric and stone. At exactly 8:47 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from our office manager, Diana. OMG, Marcus just got a call. He's SC Roy aiming in his office. What did you do? I smiled, imagining the scene. Right about now, Marcus would be learning that every single one of his loans, personal and business, had been purchased by a new creditor. One who was calling in all his debt immediately, as was their legal right under the terms he'd never bothered to read carefully. At 9:03 a.m., another text. He's trying to call his bank. They keep transferring him to different departments. His face is purple. I sat in my home office, sipping coffee, watching the drama unfold through the steady stream of messages from other employees. Marcus attempting to reach his financial advisor. Marcus shouting at his assistant to get his lawyer on the phone. Marcus slowly realizing that every financial lifeline he counted on had disappeared. At 9:45 a.m., James called. He just figured out it was you, he said, amusement clear in his voice. Demanded to know how you could possibly have the resources to buy his debt. I explained that when someone has been quietly building a separate investment portfolio for years, they can do surprising things. I leaned back in my chair. How did he take that? Not well. Especially when I explained the terms of repayment. Another text from Diana. Board members arriving for emergency meeting. Marcus looks like he's about to explode. Perfect timing. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. Each time, I watched it ring out. Finally, a text. We need to talk. Now. I waited exactly 17 minutes before responding. I'm available for lunch. Sterling Hotel, noon. Private dining room. His reply was immediate. I'll be there. I spent the next hour reviewing the documents James had prepared, making sure every detail was perfect. This meeting wasn't about revenge. It was about reconstruction. At precisely noon, I walked into the Sterling's private dining room. Marcus was already there, sitting rigid in his chair, face tight with barely controlled rage. How? He demanded before I could even sit down. How did you do this? I took my time settling into my seat, smoothing my napkin across my lap. The same way I built our client relationships, Marcus. Carefully, methodically, cautiously. He leaned forward, hands clenched on the table. This is insane. You can't just buy someone's debt and demand immediate repayment. I'll fight this. Actually, I can. It's all in the terms you signed. Page 47, paragraph 3 of your largest loan agreement. In the event of ownership transfer, the new creditor maintains the right to modify payment terms or demand immediate satisfaction of the debt. You really should read the fine print. I'll go bankrupt, he said, voice cracking slightly. Yes, I agree calmly. Unless we can reach an agreement. He stared at me, realization dawning. What do you want? I pulled out a folder, similar to the one he presented me with just days ago, and slid it across the table. Everything, I said simply. Your shares in the company, your board seats, complete control. You can't be serious. I am, and before you decide to fight this, remember, I now control every cent you owe. If you don't sign, I'll call in all the debt. Every loan, every credit line. By this time tomorrow, you'll be in bankruptcy court watching your entire life implode. His face went through a fascinating series of emotions: rage, disbelief, fear, and finally, defeat. My father built this company, he whispered. No, I corrected gently. Your father started it. We built it. And then you tried to steal it. I tapped the folder. Now you have a choice. Sign everything over to me and I'll restructure your debt. Give you reasonable terms, a path to pay it off. Or don't sign and learn what bankruptcy really feels like. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle clink of distant silverware and the pounding of my own heart. Then slowly, Marcus reached for the folder. I watched him sign every page, each signature more defeated than the last. When he finished, he looked up at me with something close to admiration mixed with his hatred. I underestimated you, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. You did. He stood straightening his jacket with shaking hands. What happens now? Now, you go back to the office and announce your immediate resignation. You tell everyone it's for personal reasons. You thank them for their time and you walk away. By the end of the day, your office will be empty. And if I don't? I smiled. Then everyone learns exactly why you're leaving. Every detail of your hidden debt. Every risky decision you tried to cover up. Every lie you told the board. Which version would you prefer? He walked out without another word, leaving the signed documents on the table between us. I sat there for a long time after he left, letting the magnitude of what I just accomplished sink in. In less than 72 hours, I'd gone from nearly losing everything to gaining complete control. My phone buzzed. Diana again. Marcus just announced he's leaving. Emergency all-hands meeting in 30 minutes. What is happening? I stood gathering my things with careful precision. It was time for the next phase, rebuilding what Marcus had nearly destroyed. But first, I had an all-hands meeting to attend. After all, every good story needs a proper ending. The conference room hummed with nervous energy as I walked in. Every chair was filled, with more employees standing along the walls, all eyes fixed on the empty spot at the head of the table where Marcus usually held court. His dramatic resignation announcement had sent shockwaves through the office, and now everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I took my seat quietly, noting the mixture of confusion and relief on people's faces. Many of them had expected me to be gone by now, stripped of power and position. Instead, here I was, calm and composed, while Marcus's desk was being cleared by building maintenance. Thomas Reed, my former mentor and board member, cleared his throat. Given the unexpected circumstances, we should discuss immediate leadership transitions and... Actually, I interrupted smoothly, sliding copies of the newly signed ownership documents across the table. That's already been handled. The room fell silent as Thomas picked up the papers, his face going pale as he read. The other board members leaned in, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock as they realized what they were seeing. This gives you controlling interest, Thomas stammered. How did you? The details aren't important, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. What matters is moving forward, and to do that, we need to address the cancer that's been growing in this company. I stood buttoning my blazer with deliberate precision. For the past year, Marcus has been making increasingly risky financial decisions, hiding debt, and undermining client relationships. He convinced this board to support his attempt to force me out, not because I was ineffective, but because I was the only one asking questions about his methods. Thomas wouldn't meet my eyes. None of the board members would. That ends today, I continued. I'm dissolving the current board, effective immediately. New members will be appointed within 30 days, chosen for their expertise and integrity, not their willingness to rubber stamp bad decisions. One of the junior board members, Peterson, started to protest. I cut him off with a raised hand. You might want to check your email before objecting, James. The SEC would be very interested in those trades you made right after Marcus shared confidential company information last month. He shut his mouth so fast his teeth clicked. I turned to address the wider room. To everyone else, I want to be clear. This is a fresh start. No more hidden agendas, no more politics, no more watching good work get buried under bad leadership. From now on, we succeed or fail based on merit, not manipulation. Diana, our office manager, was the first to break into a smile. Others followed, the tension in the room slowly transforming into something else. Hope, maybe, or relief. There will be changes, I acknowledged. But they'll make us stronger, not weaker. Any questions? Hands shot up across the room. I spent the next hour answering them, being as transparent as possible about where we were headed. By the time the meeting ended, the energy had shifted completely. People were talking, planning, already adapting to the new reality. As the room cleared out, Thomas lingered behind. He looked older somehow, diminished. Catherine, he started. I need to explain. No, I cut him off gently. You don't. You chose a side, Thomas. The wrong one. Sometimes that's all there is to say. He nodded slowly, gathering his things. At the door, he paused. You know, I taught corporate strategy for 20 years, wrote books about it, and I never saw this coming. I smiled faintly. That's because you were looking for aggression, not patience. Sometimes the quietest moves are the most decisive. After you left, I sat alone in the conference room, looking out over the city skyline. The same view I'd stared at countless times while Marcus held forth about his grand visions. Now it was my view, earned through careful planning and perfect timing. My phone buzzed. A message from James Sullivan. Just heard from Marcus's lawyer. He's not going to fight the transfer. Smart man, finally. I typed back a quick, "Thank you for everything," and stood, smoothing my skirt. Time to get to work. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. I appointed a new board, bringing in experienced leaders who shared my vision for sustainable growth. We conducted a full audit of the company's finances, cleaning up the mess Marcus had left behind. Every day brought new discoveries of his mismanagement, but also new opportunities to rebuild stronger. Client meetings were particularly satisfying. Many of them had been nervous about Marcus's aggressive tactics, but were visibly relieved to work with me directly again. 3 major accounts that had been considering leaving renewed their contracts within the first month. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the takeover, I received an unexpected visitor. Sandra Walsh, Marcus's mother and the widow of our company's founder, appeared in my office doorway. "Do you have a moment?" she asked quietly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same one where Marcus had sat to deliver his ultimatum that felt like a lifetime ago. Sandra settled in, studying me with clear, intelligent eyes. "I've been watching," she said finally, "what you've done with the company, the changes you've made." I waited, keeping my expression neutral. "William, my husband, would have approved," she continued. "He always said the measure of a business isn't in its profits, but in its foundation." Marcus never understood that. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it, about how things ended with him. She waved away my apology. "Don't be. My son made his choices. But I'm not here about him. I'm here about the future." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. So many important moments in my life lately had involved folders, and placed it on my desk. "William left something in trust," she explained. "A separate set of patents from his early work. They weren't part of the company assets because he wasn't sure they'd ever be viable. But with the new technologies available now." I opened the folder and began reading. With each page, my excitement grew. The applications for these patents in today's market were staggering. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked finally. Sandra smiled, her first real smile of the meeting. "Because you understand what William understood. That business isn't about quick wins or power plays. It's about building something that lasts." She stood, straightening her jacket. "The patents are yours if you want them. Use them well." After she left, I sat back in my chair, the folder open before me. Through my office windows, I could see our team working, talking, collaborating with new energy. The shadow of Marcus's leadership was finally fading, replaced by something brighter, more sustainable. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Marcus had taken a position with a small firm in Arizona, far from the circles of power he'd once dominated. I found I didn't care. He was part of the past, and I was focused on the future. That evening, as I walked through the office before heading home, I passed the wall of company photos. Marcus's face still appeared in many of them, a reminder of where we'd started. But instead of removing them, I'd ordered a new installation, a timeline of our company's evolution, including the recent changes. Because every story needs its turning points, its moments of truth. Deanna caught me studying the display. "Should we take down the old photos?" she asked hesitantly. I shook my head. "No, they're part of our history. But more importantly, they're a reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes the strongest response to a threat isn't fighting back immediately. It's waiting, watching, and choosing the perfect moment to show your true power." She nodded thoughtfully. "You know, everyone thought you were just going to accept it. When Marcus tried to push you out, they said you were too— what was the word they used?" "Cautious?" I suggested with a small smile. "Yeah, that's it." She grinned. "Guess they learned." Indeed they had. And so had I. 6 months after Marcus's departure, Walsh and Porter Solutions was transformed. Our client base had grown by 30%, employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and the new patents we developed from William Walsh's trust were revolutionizing our industry. I sat in my office, my rightfully earned office, reviewing quarterly reports when an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "You were right." It was from Marcus. "I underestimated you," he wrote. "Not just your strategy, but your vision. The company is stronger now than it ever was under my leadership. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know you proved me wrong about everything, including what real power looks like." I closed the email without responding. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. They simply need to be lived. Looking out over the city as the sun set, I thought about power, real power. Not the kind that comes from forcing others to submit, but the kind that comes from building something so strong that others choose to follow. Marcus had never understood the difference. But I did, and now so did everyone else.